Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we're going to be talking about the rarest weapons from Destiny 1. These weapons are the most notorious for their difficulty or luck to obtain, and even some that are no longer attainable at all. Now, if you're going to enjoy this video, be sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel for more Destiny 1 content, but let's just get right into the video. Now, there are more than just a top 5 or a top 10 when it comes to the rarest weapons in Destiny 1, so I'm going to try and cover all the weapons that I can, and if I miss any, be sure to leave them in the comment section below because it's possible that I might miss a few. Up first is the Year 1 Praetorian Foil from the Vault of Glass raid. The Vault of Glass fusion rifle was only obtainable on the hard mode difficulty, similar to the sought after Fatebringer. However, the drop rate for Praetorian Foil was so much lower than Fatebringer, which already had a tough drop rate itself. It had a chance to drop after completing the Oracle's encounter, and I've only ever seen it drop once. It's one of the only weapons in the game that I'm missing from my collection despite having nearly 30 hard mode completions, and I'm not alone in my bad RNG run, as most people I've talked to have at least 3 Vex Mythoclasts but don't have the foil, and they have something like 50 or more completions. I think I also remember seeing somewhere that the drop rate was around 2%, but I can't confirm if that's totally accurate. However, it sounds about right considering I know so few people have it. And Vault of Glass has its fair share of sought after loot, but the foil, despite being an overall average fusion rifle, remains to be one of the most sought after simply for its rarity. The weapon was brought back in the Year 3 version of Vault of Glass and wasn't nearly as rare, so maybe one day I'll get around to running some level 30 VOG runs for a chance at the Year 1 version, because it still eludes me. Something about it, I just want to say that I've got it. Next, we have the Queen's Wrath weapons from the first ever Queen's Wrath event back in October 2014. These weapons could only be acquired from completing Queen Wrath bounties from Petra at the tower, and this event only took place once in this style, meaning all of the weapons were exclusive to this one event. This includes weapons like the Supremacy. Some of you may recognize this weapon from Destiny 2 that was obtained in the Last Wish raid, but in Destiny 1 it was only available during this event. It was a top tier sniper even in Destiny 1, being of the higher impact archetype similar to the 1000-yard stare. Other weapons exclusive to this event include the Merciless, the Ninth Edict, Palace Regime, Her Vengeance, and Wolf's Curse. When Queen's Wrath finally did return in May of 2015, it brought new weapons and armor, leaving these weapons to be highly coveted and remembered for the one and only time the event took place in the tower. So if you have one of these, you're definitely lucky. Galhorn. Arguably the most sought after weapon in Destiny 1 and one of the rarest exotic drops in the game. The Galhorn has become the most recognizable weapon in Destiny's history, and even throughout all of gaming, making lists as one of the best weapons in video game history. It's for good reason though. Nothing could top the Galhorn's raw DPS in the heavy slot. Galhorn was also notorious for its rarity, however. Not nearly the rarest weapon on the list, certainly not as rare as Praetorian Foil by any means, but still a weapon that eluded many people for the entirety of Destiny 1 Year 1. I was lucky enough to have the Galhorn be my first ever exotic. It dropped from Atheon on my first ever clear of Vault of Glass. And this was back when I had no idea what it even was, and everybody was all mad at me and I didn't know why. But pretty soon I realized how lucky I was considering none of my friends had it, and its popularity began to skyrocket. As many of you know, Xur sold this weapon the second week of the game, and many people passed up on it not knowing its power. And that was a huge mistake, but again, nobody knew what the Galhorn was at the time. Xur would then sell it just one more time about a year later, just before the release of Taken King, making it a bit lackluster considering the weapon wasn't going to be usable in Taken King content. Its rarity really did depend on the player though, as I have some friends with over 10 drops, and some friends who didn't get theirs until well into House of Wolves. But everybody has a wild story related to the Galhorn, so let me know your Galhorn story in the comments. Up next is the Trials of Osiris weapons, specifically the Adept weapons, and even more specifically, the Year 1 Adept weapons. Year 1 Adept weapons were arguably the most sought after because they had the elemental damage applied to them, something usually unique to raid weapons. The weapons from Trials were just solid weapons enough to begin with, even without an element applied, so having the elemental damage really made them powerhouses. Like the Messenger, the Scholar, and most importantly, the Jewel of Osiris. Now I say most importantly because the Jewel of Osiris had the rare chance of being a solar burn. Now why is this important? Well, the Fatebringer was the arc damage hand cannon in the game at the time, and the Word of Crota was the void hand cannon at the time. Both raid weapons, and the only thing missing was a solar hand cannon to complete the trifecta. Jewel of Osiris was one of the only 2 weapons that had a chance to be solar, the other being the 6-Dreg Pride from the Prison of Elder Skolas fight. The amount of RNG to obtain one of these was insane. You first needed to grind your way to a flawless win and open the Lighthouse chest, which would net you one of 4 weapons. So only a 25% chance that it would be the Jewel, and then another RNG roll would then need to happen for it to be solar, a 33% chance there, making the total chance for a solar Jewel of Osiris just 8%. And if going flawless was proved pretty tough for you, then these odds were pretty rough because going flawless was difficult on its own. And it wasn't much easier to acquire the 6-Dreg Pride Solar either, considering you only could acquire it from the Skolas fight, which was another very challenging activity. The drop rate for the Solar 6-Dreg Pride would be about the same at 8%, and let's just say it was really tough to try and get a Solar Hand Cannon in year 1. But not everyone was going for a Solar Jewel and wanted a specific element for the Messenger or the Scholar as well, which meant they had the same drop chance for their target weapons. In year 2 and year 3, Adept Trials weapons were still sought after, with the weapons receiving extra perks and a unique paint job. However, nothing will top the rarity and exclusivity of the year 1 Adept weapons. Another selection of weapons that are extremely rare are the vendor weapons from year 1. Crucible, Vanguard, and faction vendors reset their inventory every 3 months or so their inventory was pretty short-lived. Tons of fantastic weapons I loved in year 1 came from the faction and Crucible vendors like the Red Hand 9, the Vanquisher 8, the Fall Will Probably Kill You 1969, and the Shadow Price. Some weapons did eventually get re-brought back into the loot pool, like the Shadow Price, the Comedian, the Devil You Know, but many of these weapons stayed behind in year 1 and remain to be some of the rarest because there are simply no ways to obtain the weapons. I really wish I did a better job of snagging more of these because I only have a few from the year 1 vendors. But let me know in the comments which ones you still have from this particular time, because there's some actually amazing weapons that were available from those vendors, and I'd be curious to see what you got. Necrochasm. Necrochasm is easily one of the rarest exotics in year 1. It required many layers of RNG to obtain, and the steps for the year 1 version are slightly different than the year 3 version. First, you'd need to acquire a Husk of the Pit common auto rifle, which was fairly simple in theory. It would drop from any knight that used the Blade of Crota, and you could find these guys out in the patrol space during the Dark Below, but effectively farming the Fist of Crota mission would be your best chance at getting it. The drop rate in year 1 for the Husk was actually pretty low, and most people would farm this mission for a couple hours before finally obtaining it. Once you did obtain it, you need to kill around 500 Hive with the weapon. Obviously, farming the Dark Beyond mission on the moon proved to be the best place to do this. Next, you'd need to acquire the Embalming Orb from Eris Morn at the tower by hitting rank 3 in her reputation level, which could take quite a bit of grinding. Using the Embalming Orb on the weapon would then turn it into Eidolon Ally. Now for the hard part, or at least the part requiring the most amount of RNG. Receiving the Crux of Crota from killing Crota on hard mode. The drop rate for the Crux was extremely low, like less than 5% based on some Reddit posts that have done the math, and I gotta say I definitely believe that their math was correct, because I was lucky enough to get around my 20th clear on hard, but I've only seen it drop once after that from my friend despite having a lot of clears on the Crota's End raid. And considering the arduous grind to actually get this thing to drop as the Husk, and then grind the Eris Morn reputation, and then grind another rare drop in the hard mode raid, I would say this is one of the rarest, if not the rarest, exotics in the game at the time. When they brought this back a few years later, the grind wasn't as intense and was actually fairly simple to obtain, but the year 1 version remains to be an absolute insane grind that required tons of RNG. And was it even worth it? Definitely not in year 1. In year 1, Necrochasm was not good at all. Needless to say, it was a pretty wet fart to an already difficult and annoying questline. Exotics in general were pretty hard to come by in Destiny 1 early on. You only had a few opportunities with higher chances of getting them. One of the most famous ways was through what's known as the exotic chest in the Vault of Glass, where people would load into a checkpoint with their friends to acquire the best chance for any exotic. And this is where a lot of people would obviously try for Galhorn, but Galhorn wasn't the only rare exotic people were chasing. There were others that just seemed to have lower drop rates. One that took me a while to get was the Universal Remote, something that I would have loved to have early on, but I didn't get until a week before Taken King. Icebreaker, arguably the best exotic sniper, which thankfully I was able to get early on. Plan C, Thunderlord, Last Word. So many other exotics were definitely tough to come by, and their rarity really made them so popular to grind for. Rare items in Destiny have kept people playing for thousands of hours, and rare drops keep people coming back day after day. Some people may fall off from getting sick of the grind, but many people stay dedicated to obtaining as much as they could. And I was definitely one of those people. I wanted to complete my exotic collection as fast as possible. My next video will be about the rarest ships in Destiny 1, and there are some wild ones, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on that video. But I hope you enjoyed this one, and if you did, please leave a like on it, I would really appreciate it, and I will see you all in the next one.